Hi, I'm Slice.
And I'm Emily.
And welcome to our third episode of Home Records, the podcast where we, two married musicians, pick an album at random from our 2,000-piece vinyl collection and discuss its personal and cultural importance. How are you doing today, Em?
I am having the best day. We've had the most mundane human day, and it's been the best. We've spent all morning running errands, and now we're doing a podcast. And I know that sounds so boring to anybody listening, but we've been on the road doing shows for I don't even know.
A lot of weekends out of town.
2.5 months.
And very busy during the week.
So today was nice.
Yeah, days like those are really the best you can ask for sometimes.
I know. We needed a giant catch-up day. Don't get me wrong. I've loved all of the last 2.5 months. It's been some of the busiest musically, so it's been really, really fun to see everybody and see so many wonderful people. It was nice to kind of catch up.
Yep.
Reset a little bit.
Indeed. So, and before we kind of get back into it, or to start getting back into it, we had planned to do another episode of this podcast.
Yeah, episode 3.
And we've actually got a fairly decent lineup of potential records to be talking in future episodes.
Yeah, we went a little crazy. We've picked the next 13 episodes.
Something like that. Yeah. We had to decide how long each season is going to be.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah.
It's coming together.
It is. And we are continuing to refine our process, refine how we pretty much conversate as we go along in each episode. And, it's starting to kind of hone in, I think, more and more every episode too.
I think so. I think we're clicking.
Yes.
We're going now. We know what we're doing a little bit more. Episode 3 is where it starts to hone in, I think.
I hope so. I think this will be an interesting record to kind of feel that out with.
Well, we're kind of doing this podcast truthfully because if you've met my husband in real life, he is a walking podcast. He knows more about records than anybody I've ever met. And I feel like we needed a space for you to share your passion for this. And so it's been really fun to see that coming to life, that vision.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of, what record do we pull off the shelf today?
So for this episode, we pulled out kind of a semi-obscure-ish record from a popular band. We pulled out the Beach Boys' Love You.
Which I had never heard of in my entire life. Did not know it was on the shelf, which is kind of the point of the podcast. Let's go through this record collection that I married into.
Well, the funny thing is, so there's two interesting things here that I just want to mention. Well, one of them is that, for those that don't know me, and I might have briefly mentioned this, or at least in passing in a couple previous episodes, but the Beach Boys are my all-time favorite band, group, artist of all-time favorite.
Let me say, the surprising thing about that is, so many bands and so many artists that you get on a roll, and then inevitably someone says, "Who's your favorite?" And most people, I think, as much music as you do, they would say "Oh man, it's so hard to choose. In what genre? What year? Da da." But no, you are so sure. You're always the Beach Boys. It is without a doubt that is the answer.
Yeah, they are number one. They will always be number one. I pretty much I think I'm solid on my top 5, top 6 or 7 favorite artists of all time. But
can I guess them all?
No.
What? I it's a challenge. Let me do it.
Well, let's leave them in suspense for a minute so we could focus on the record.
I feel like that's our version of the wedding game. How well do you know your partner? Could I name your top 5?
Well, what I will say is that some of those other artists in my top 5, we'll be talking about some of their records later on in future episodes. So anyways, the other interesting thing is that I do own a lot of Beach Boys records. Funnily enough, they had a lot of hit records, they had a lot of hit singles in the 60s, But I actually don't own all their 60s records. I own pretty much their entire discography from 1966, from Pet Sounds pretty much to 1985's self-titled Beach Boys album. The thing is, Pet Sounds is actually my favorite album of all time. But I chose to talk about this record, and there's a few reasons for that. I think the bottom line was that Pet Sounds is one of those albums that has been talked about to death, and I mean, I do have a lot of personal connection with that record as well, but also in the wake of unfortunately, band leader and creative genius Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys have passed away. And when he passed away, I knew a lot of Beach Boys fans, a lot of Brian fans, and a lot of them actually gravitated towards coming to this record, The Beach Boys Love You, because even though Pet Sounds is the masterpiece of the Beach Boys and of Brian Wilson, Beach Boys Love You is definitely, I think, the most representative of Brian's essence, of not just his musicality, but just sort of his psyche. Because this record was the first album since Pet Sounds and Smile that was entirely produced by Brian. He wrote all the songs for it. He played a majority of the instruments on it. So, and it was actually initially supposed to be a Brian Wilson solo record. That was the initial plan.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but then he decided, or someone decided, that the Beach Boys should sing on it, so it ended up turning into a Beach Boys record. And incidentally, the other part is that currently Al Jardine, original member of the Beach Boys, is on tour with Brian Wilson's backing band, and they're doing the Love You record live, and there's also a box set coming out pretty soon that is going to include the Beach Boys Love You album. And this is an album that, if you talk to any Beach Boys fan that has listened to like everything from the Beach Boys and is like either a diehard or close to a diehard, they will say this is like in the top 5 of the best Beach Boys records, probably top 3 more so. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. And it was a flop when it came out.
Yeah,
too.
that's what I was gonna say. Like when I was kind of researching the record for today, I learned that this was really not accepted by critics at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't really accepted by anybody, to be honest. And actually, critics actually did eventually come around to this record, and some of it did they're like, this is creatively like a very Brian record. They're like, there's a lot of creativity here, but there was just no commercial appeal for the record whatsoever at that time. And we'll get into why in a second.
Well, like, that's what's so funny about the Beach Boys to me is like, there's a lot of things that they do to me that do not seem commercial. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, I'm not from the 60s, 70s. I don't quite understand that listener at the time. But to me, like, there are so many things about like the Beach Boys aesthetic is it's choral, it's tight harmonies, it's like it's an entire sound that is so them, and it's literally nobody else. And even people who are very inspired by them, it's still not them, because it really was the different voices of that group that create their sound. And to me, it's their sound is not the most commercial thing in the world, but there are so many hits by them. And they created a world for their music.
Yeah.
That really, like, we talk today.
Yeah.
Today we talk about world building all the time, like as artists, like you and me.
Yeah. Like what are you creating through your music for an audience, or through the music in and of itself?
Yeah. And in the world for artists today, like there's so many platforms and social media platforms and so many like different ways that like every artist now, they're building more than just music. They're building content alongside their music. So the term world building, if you're in our industry, gets passed around all the time. But that wasn't something happening in the 60s or 70s. And I would really say the Beach Boys did that specifically.
The Beach Boys were the first to do it because they were the group that blended a style of music, which was surf rock, which was pretty much exclusively California by the time they came around, with jazz quartet harmonies and the Great American Songbook, melodic sensibilities, and rock and roll, and taking all those elements and creating pretty much the sound of California.
Yeah.
And that was where they started, and that's where they were for many years. They created a sound. They created an original sound, again, derived from other influences, but people think of that and they associate the Beach Boys. But the thing was that their world building expanded from there, because they went on to innovate and expand their sound and expand their musicality. Brian was very much interested in doing that, both compositionally and through incorporating different sounds and instruments in the studio, producing those records. But the thing is also, after Pet Sounds, after Smile got shelved, when Brian kind of retreated and wasn't as involved in the band anymore, the band continued, and they made a lot of great records that continued to build off what they were doing before. And it got to a point where, more band members were contributing songs and production. So there was still something happening there. But the two problems they were having was that the general public in the U.S. was not interested in anything outside of what they were known for in the early hits.
Yeah.
But the other problem was that was also because their label was not willing to market them as anything other than, being a surf rock group, But then when they got with the new label in the early 70s, then they started to have a little bit more creative momentum, but still not really a lot of commercial success. Although the 71 album Surf's Up did decently. I think it charted like number 46, and then they added a couple new band members from outside the family, and they made some really good albums, and they were a really powerful touring act in the early 70s too. So that's going to bring us up to speed a little bit on the Love You record in terms of Brian's involvement. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the Beach Boys are fascinating in a lot of ways, just as a group. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's so interesting is Brian Wilson stepped away from touring completely and took over the songwriting and production.
Well, he always did that. He was always the songwriter and producer from the beginning.
But he toured with them at the beginning.
Yeah, but
my question is, because this record, Brian did all the instruments, and then basically the guys flew in and did some of those vocals. So my question is, after he made the decision to stop touring, where does this record come in?
So that's what brings us up to speed in 1974. And any Beach Boys fan will say 1974 was one of the most pivotal years in the Beach Boys history, because that is when the Endless Summer compilation came out.
Okay.
And it was a compilation of all their 60s hits, everything before Good Vibrations, but it was included on the CD later. That album made top 5, 1974, the Endless Summer compilation.
Okay.
So that revived the Beach Boys in terms of commercial success, was that compilation. It was a top 5 in the Billboard 200.
Okay.
And so suddenly it did a couple things. It kind of sort of put their creative momentum to a screeching halt, and it kind of reverted them to a nostalgia act. But they were kind of bigger than ever. And then 75 rolled around, and they came out with an album called 15 Big Ones. And their management created this whole campaign called Brian's Back. It's like, oh, Brian's back. He's recording with the band. He's producing a little bit. He's on the road with them. And it was a totally bogus PR campaign, because, Brian would be on the road with the Beach Boys, but he would barely be, on stage with them most of the time. He would mostly just be there in his bathrobe, just standing and either playing bass or just sitting at a keyboard, either plucking at it, maybe singing a little bit, but was not very engaged with it too. And he was involved in 15 Big Ones. He sang lead on some of the songs, but that album is half covers and half originals. I am not that big of a fan of the 15 Big Ones. It has its fans, but they also got a top 5 record, top 5 single from that album, which was a cover of Chuck Berry's Rock and Roll Music. So like that whole between 74 and 75, that is what pretty much revived the Beach Boys into the public consciousness, into the mainstream consciousness the first time again. So
but I want to know where this record comes in.
That's the build up here. That's
Okay.
the build up. So they do the 15 Big Ones, they do the tour, they do Brian's Back, and it happens. And then by that point, Brian, Yeah, he was still writing. He was still writing songs that the Beach Boys were cutting. He was trying to work with other artists. He wasn't really producing other artists, but just like writing and hanging out with, just kind of, he kind of retreated. The legend says he was in bed for 3 years, which was more of like him just kind of retreating, just sleeping all day and just overeating and self-medicating and drinking and things like that. Opening up a health store at one point, that was a thing. And his mental health was not necessarily in the best place too, because this was before he got some psychiatric care, and that's a whole other story we may or may not get into. So by that point, Brian was kind of not necessarily the most reliable, but the Beach Boys or their management or whoever was constantly insisting that he was still part of the group, which I think was kind of a detriment for him, because I think he just didn't want to really do it, but he was kind of forced to in a way. But then this album comes along, and like I said before, this was supposed to be a solo record. So I think Brian just kind of got a bug of just starting to write again, and just wrote a bunch of songs and wanting to produce them in the studio and wanting to do it all himself. Most of the instrumentation is all synthesizers, all done on synthesizers and drum machines and keyboards, and so I think a lot of these songs kind of started out in the demo stage, and then they got worked up. They ended up, getting worked up for the band for, what ended up becoming the final product. So that's kind of where we land on here with this album.
Interesting. Brian,
he was still doing things, but in terms of his output, it wasn't like what it was in the 70s, mm-hmm. or in the 60s, excuse me. And the one thing I'll note about also the sound of the Beach Boys, because we kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but everyone's voice had kind of changed by the mid 70s, especially Brian's and his brother Dennis's voices, because they were both like, drinking and self-medicating, a lot of chain smoking too. So Brian doesn't really, for the most part, he doesn't really sing like he used to, except for one track, but we'll get to that in a second.
I noticed, I even put down like, who is singing? Because the vocals, there's a very raspy Brian Wilson vocal on like a couple of the songs, and it is very, very different than kind of that pure vocal that you hear on the other records.
Right, exactly.
And that's from the chain smoking?
Yep.
Because I couldn't figure it out. I was like, why didn't he just like wait till he was feeling better? Like,
well,
it is very clearly different.
But that's the thing. His voice never really recovered.
Okay.
From what it once sounded like. He could still sing falsetto, kind of when he wanted to. He didn't really want to. Even there's that on the 15 Big Ones record too. There's some songs where he's singing more of in a baritone voice, when he was definitely like a first tenor.
Yeah, like I actually thought it was like a different. I was like, oh, who's singing? And it didn't sound like him at first.
There is one or two songs that definitely are deceiving at that Dennis is actually singing lead, but we'll go down the line on some of that, because that's the thing about the songs on Beach Boys Love You, is that they're very how would you describe them?
How would I describe it? It's definitely the Beach Boys. It's definitely like their style.
But what are the songs? The songs themselves. How would you describe the songs or the songwriting?
It's just kind of like happy-go-lucky, big sonically, I feel.
What do you mean by big sonically?
Like, some of the songs are just like, the synthesizers, just to me, that's a very like big sounding instrument. So they just kind of like fill the room. Does that make sense?
Well, that's probably because it's like, these are proto synthesizers almost. Like these weren't like your 80s synthesizers. These were like, like no one really. Some people refer to this record as actually like the Beach Boys punk record or proto synth punk record. And a lot of that is because it's very lo-fi. There's not a lot of, like, you don't hear real instruments that much, and a lot of the synthesizers are honky sounding. They're very cheap sounding, and because of that, this album ended up influencing a lot of lo-fi music and some punk music to a certain extent too.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about the Beach Boys' entire catalog to know what's different about this record.
I mean, that's the thing though, is like, I guess you could look at it not necessarily as a comparison, but it just kind of the album speaking for itself, sort of outside of it, because one could argue this is very outside of anything the Beach Boys have done before or after. It's very singular in that way, with the exception. I mean, there's some songwriting things that are similar, but you know, lyrically, this record, this is the record that Brian wrote all of his lyrics. Brian didn't really write his lyrics back in the day. You know, they were written by Mike Love or other collaborators like Roger Christian or Tony Asher, Van Dyke Parks. You can usually tell when Brian writes his own lyrics.
Why?
Because they're very childlike. They're very, like, you know, unassuming. They're very in some ways very basic. They're not poetic.
They're kind of silly.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
Just kind of, I like childlike. That's a very good word for it.
Yeah. And that's why I say this record kind of describes Brian's essence, because Brian has always had that sort of innocent type of not only personality, just sort of aura about him. You know, he never, you know, it's like, you know, he's kind of like that sort of wide-eyed innocent child you want to protect at all costs.
Yeah, he's kind of like a big kid.
Yeah, I mean, he was a big kid. He's 6'5". You ever stand next to Brian? He's huge.
Well, like that. Okay, so that kind of goes into like the certain tracks off the record.
Yes.
So like, I will say my favorite tracks off the record is the roller skating for kid.
Skating child?
Yeah, roller skating child.
Yeah.
That track is so funny to me. And to me, when I was saying like it's such a big sound, like that one just kind of catches me off guard a little bit with how big it feels and how fun it is. And I think it captures that kind of childlike thing that you were talking about. Like I want that to play in the background when I'm like like I just go back to like when I'm a kid in middle school, like going to the roller rink on Friday night was a big thing where I'm from, and I want that playing. Like it is that feeling, and it's nostalgic and it's fun. And
well, so I'm glad you feel that way, because this is actually one of the most polarizing lyrics in the Beach Boys catalog. Because the thing is, it is that, but it's never really implicitly stated how old the narrator is.
Oh, well, like the thing about that song is like I wouldn't say it's like the lyrics aren't what I love about it. It's just the sonic feel of it, I will say.
Gotcha.
I mean, and I'm a person, everybody who knows me, I'm a big lyrics person. That song, there are certain reasons to love certain songs, and that song to me is like just the sonic feel of that song.
Because if you pay attention to the lyric, it won't make sweet loving when the sun goes down. We'll even do more when her mom is not around. Well, oh my gosh, oh my gee, she really sends chills inside of me.
Yeah, like I heard that, but I was like picturing the narrator to be like a high school kid. Like,
yeah. Like,
I mean, that's a really like, and I think that's what's cute about it in a way. It's like, well, yeah, like see, when you were in high school, like roller skating, like you were kind of waiting until the parents left.
But that's the thing, is not a lot of people would feel that way if they were hearing a grown man singing it.
I guess so. I don't know. I guess I didn't really think of it that way. I just kind of took it. I think I just kind of put it in terms of like, well, when was I roller skating? And that was like 8th or 9th grade, you know? See,
as a side note, there have been some of those lyrics that Brian has written. Again, that's kind of a way you can tell Brian wrote it. He also had another song on the MIU album that is probably on some watch list called Hey Little Tomboy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But again, it's one of those things. It's a little more overt than this song. But again, you really don't know how old the narrator is saying, because it's talking about the tomboy being 12 or 13.
Yeah. I guess
you know.
And I don't know. Maybe I'm naive about that. I just like when I hear the Beach Boys, I just automatically go back to like I'm 15 listening to the Beach Boys, because I just feel like the whole aura of them is nostalgia.
And that's, I think, why it was so hard for people to gravitate towards this record, is because, the Beach Boys were not, boys. anymore.
Interesting.
They were all,
I
they were,
didn't think about it that
they
way.
were grown. They're older men in their late 30s. They've all been through it. But actually, you just said a word, and this was the word I was trying to think of earlier. Is that a lot of the lyrics have that sort of naive quality to them?
Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
What other songs stick out to you?
Well, just sticking with the songs that stuck out to me sonically, because there were 4 tracks that really stuck out to me, and 2 of them stuck out to me for sonic reasons that I loved, and 2 of them stuck out more for the lyrical content. And so the other one sonically was the Johnny Carson song.
Johnny Carson, which is probably my favorite song from the track.
I love that.
Yeah.
I just love the feel of it. It's very different than the rest of the record. Or it felt different.
It is. There is another one that's also a little bit more different, but we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, no, Johnny Carson's definitely the most, like, it's upbeat in the way that the other upbeat songs aren't.
Yeah. I just kind of like the way it feels. It's just a little bit. It's not dark. Nothing about the Beach Boys is dark, but there's a little bit of a different vibe.
There's a little bit of this sort of. I don't want to say like maybe it's not this, but it's like only like a creepy-ish vibe. I don't know I don't think it's that. It's not literally that, but it's like, it's like the music you hear when you're like in a Scooby-Doo episode or something like that.
And I always like songs like that.
I
really do. I like stuff that's a little minor, a little bit off.
Yeah.
I just kind of do. And so it was like, oh, yeah, I like that one.
Mm-hmm. The other part of my connection with the Beach Boys is when I was living in Chicago, I took a class at Old Town School of Folk Music, and it was actually a Monkees ensemble, because Monkees are also one of my favorite bands of all time. Where they land in the top 5, you go ahead and guess. But then that ensemble eventually evolved into Beach Boys ensemble, because we were all huge diehard Beach Boys fans and Brianistas, And actually, and the thing was, I was already a diehard by the time I met all of them. They were just as diehard, if not diehard, more than me, but they were also older than me, so they've been around the block longer. And this was always like the song that I jokingly said, it's like, hey, let's play this one. I always found an excuse to insert Johnny Carson into the conversation. That's how much I enjoy this song, and this is probably the one from this album that I've listened to the most.
I think if you know any of my music and then you heard Johnny Carson, it would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense why she's into that one. Like, it feels the most similar to like kind of the alt country space that I live in.
Yeah,
because it's just a little bit darker.
Yeah, but
it's interesting because it does still feel like the Beach Boys. That's the thing I respect the most about the Beach Boys is they've always known their sound, and that's a really tricky thing to figure out as an artist.
What is interesting too is that if you compare the Beach Boys records from the 60s to the 70s, there's a difference in their blend than before. And again, that's because Brian and Dennis's voices change, so where they sit in a harmony mix is very different. And in some ways, they're not as like, you could just hear the difference. And maybe part of that is also the production. In the 70s, their harmonies are more like wah, 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 where in the 60s it's more like oh,
a little smoother.
Yeah, a little smoother, a little bit more kind of open, if you will, where these ones are a little more closed and a little brighter in that way.
But yeah, so I love both of those songs for like kind of the sonic feel of them. They just kind of feel just larger than life sonically, and I love that. The other two songs I love off this record, I love for more of the lyrical side of it and just the message of it. And that's I Want to Pick You Up. Mm-hmm. Is that about his child, his son?
Mm-hmm. About daughter.
His daughter.
Yep.
The thing about Brian that is so cool to me is the Beach Boys do this giant sounding, really, really fun songs, and then they equally do these like insanely heartfelt, sincere songs, and you get both of those on this record. Mm-hmm. And I Want to Pick You Up, I'm just like, what a beautiful tribute to a child. Mm-hmm. It's just so beautiful, those lyrics.
Which is also a little bit I'll get to some other things, the aftermath of this record in a second, but yeah, that one is probably, I like that song. It's not my most favorite. The back end of the record kind of peters out for me a little bit with this record, because it's like that one and Airplane and Love Is a Woman. You know, yeah.
That's funny. I had the opposite feeling.
Mm.
To me, the middle, I did not enjoy the middle.
Mm.
And then I felt like it redeemed itself in the ending songs, actually.
See, I love the ballads in the middle. Like, if you talk to some Beach Boy fans, they will talk about the middle section as being a suite.
Yeah, I definitely see that.
Because it's like...
It's very clearly to me that they're grouped together.
Yeah, so, like, you have the songs, so what's the first track? The first track in that quote-unquote suite. So it's The Night Was So Young, which The Night Was So Young, when I heard that, when I was... Because I actually have the songbook of the Beach Boys' Love You album, and I sing that, and every time I sing that, I'm like, man, Frank Sinatra could have sung this song. Like, it's very compositionally, it's very melodically, like, if you think about, like, the night was so young, I go to my room. You know, it's got a very crooner, crooner vibe with it. So, like that, and I'll Bet He's Nice, which is, it's a great Dennis lead vocal.
Yeah.
You know, Dennis lead vocal, which is always welcome on ballads, you know, for my money. And then Let's Put Our Hearts Together, which Brian actually sung with his wife at the time, Marilyn.
That was the other one I was going to mention.
Yeah.
That one and I Want to Pick You Up were my two favorite from like the lyrical point. And I didn't even like, I was like, as soon as that song started, I was like, oh, I really like this one because of the melody of that vocal. That melody is so nice. And then she comes in with her part and it's just like, oh, I love this. There's
such a bittersweetness to that song in retrospect because they divorced the following year.
That's horrible.
You know, that's actually one of the songs that Al and the Pet Sounds Band, Brian's band, haven't done, but because it's kind of hard to pull off that song without that, you know, that kind of detail in there. You know, and I quite like that song as well. And there is definitely a through line from going from, you know, which was the B-side, was from The Night Was So Young, I'll Bet He's Nice, Let's Put Our Hearts Together, I Want to Pick You Up, and then, you know, kind of ending with Airplane and Love Is a Woman. I think, and my favorites, are on the front end.
I really liked the front and I really liked the end. I wasn't too sure about the middle.
Well, I was gonna say, so here's some interesting tidbits. So the song "Good Time," that song was actually originally, at least the vocal was originally recorded in 1970.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a track that was originally slated for the Sunflower record, but it was rejected, or they left it off the record, or it was supposed to be a B-side. They never finished it, but there is a 1971 version of it. But that's why you hear the chorus with Brian's falsetto. That's because it's a vocal from 1970.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that's kind of, so when I was saying, like, for the most part, that's like, you know, how he's able to sing falsetto or not, that's kind of the sort of outlier because of that. All the production is pretty much from the Levy sessions, but I think they use that same vocal.
That makes sense because you don't hear the raspiness in his voice until later in the record.
Exactly. Because he didn't. That's like technically the first song he's saying lead on the record because it's a vocal from 1970. And I'm quite a fan of "Honkin' Down the Highway," which is probably the song from this album that's gone the most mileage historically because Al always plays this song live in his solo shows. It's quite a fun song, especially if you can get through the cringe of the lyric "honking down the gosh darn highway." Oh, Al. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, sort of the most notorious meme of the Beach Boys' entire oeuvre. Ding ding.
Okay, are you ready to? Here, we're gonna test our marriage and see.
Oh, ding ding. Yep.
There are two songs I don't like on this record.
Are they Ding Dang and Solar System?
Yes, I'm just.
Which are?
I'm like this is not. I'm not your audience for this.
Ding Dang is a masterpiece. Number one. Number two. So the story of how Ding Dang get written is that Brian was, he was in his house and a friend came over with Roger McGuinn of the Byrds. And Roger McGuinn came over and Brian was playing the piano. He was playing Shortening Bread. And Roger's like, "Hi, Brian." He's like, "Oh, hi." And then he continues to play Shortening Bread, just playing. He's like, "What's that you're playing?" He's like, "Oh, you like it?" He's like, "Yeah, I like it." And then they proceed to write Ding Dang together. And then and it was like in the middle of the night, it was like around midnight they do this, so they write it, and then they're like, all right. It's like Roger's like, "All right, I'm gonna take a nap or whatever." So he crashes on the couch, and then the sun rises. He gets up around 6-7 p.m. and Brian's still playing the damn song.
But it's so short.
I know.
How was he playing it for that long?
He's playing it over and over and over and over. This is the same man that would put on the record of "Be My Baby" by the Ronettes for like 12 hours straight.
Oh my.
I might be exaggerating, but I'm probably not.
I mean, I get it. But like,
he was obsessed with that song to the point, Shortening Bread, to the point where that motif has appeared on many various songs from other Beach Boys tunes, other Brian Wilson tunes. If you go on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen, look up the Saga of Shortening Bread.
I don't
and
understand.
It'll
Is
show
this
you
a different song?
Shortening Bread. It's a traditional song.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
and it inspires
a traditional
the song
folk song.
Ding Ding.
Ding Dang.
Ding Dang.
Ding Dang, in that order.
Oh, Lord.
No, but he used that same traditional song, Shortening Bread, in other songs. In other melodies and other songs.
I assume it was public domain.
And the Beach Boys, yeah, exactly. And the Beach Boys even recorded a version of Shortening Bread on the.
I mean, that's funny.
On a couple of records later. If you go on YouTube, look up the Saga of Shortening Bread. You will not be disappointed. And I mean, Brian actually, even before he passed, he sold Ding Dang merch on his website. That's how much people really obsess over this or are fascinated by it. But I think
I mean, it's so weird.
They also appreciate the meme. They also appreciate the meme.
I feel like what I know about Beach Boys fans being married to one is y'all love the weird stuff.
Yeah, we do. Well,
you do.
Well, it's that, or it's like the kind of method to the madness, if you will, or how to quote some of my friends, the Beach Boys. What were they thinking?
Yeah, yes, like that. Yeah, I feel like this record, it's like, oh, I'm chucking along, like, oh wow, this is so like nostalgic, and I love the sonic feel of this, and then it's like, oh, we've descended into madness once we get to Ding Dang and Solar System, and then it works its way back up with all these these sweet songs about like being a dad and like being a husband. I'm like, oh no, I'm back on board. I'm like,
there is an argument to be made that this album is kind of the fine line of what were the Beach Boys thinking, depending on who you talk to. I actually had my buddy Jesse, friend of the show. I think I pulled a dare on him, and I can't remember why, what the stakes were, but he's like, I dare you to listen to this record. And he listens to this record, and then he gets back to me. It's like, what was that?
What was going on?
He's like, it feels like I'm just like inside Brian's inner psyche, and it's chaotic, and it's like innocent. It's like you see a child on one end, or I don't think that's how he necessarily describe it, but I'm talking like him, so it sounds like that's how he described it.
I mean, that feels right though.
Yeah,
that feels right.
Yeah, it's a Solar System is definitely one of those songs that I love. It's not my favorite on the record, but it's a song I love that I have to be in the right mood to listen to.
I was like, I need this to be on some kind of like Miss Frizzle episode, or I need this to be like how I learned.
Or you mean Magic School Bus episode?
Yeah,
Magic
School
Bus.
Yeah, and I need Miss Frizzle to sing it. And I need this to be in my third grade classroom when I was learning about the solar system. And then I like pulled up like out of this song, and I'm like, wait, but I'm not a third grader learning about the solar system. This is not on a children's show. This is on a commercial record released by one of the most popular bands ever. And I'm like, I'm so confused what I'm listening to right now.
Yeah, and that was, I think, some of the reaction to this record.
I was like, is it a children's song? Because like I was like, this would slap as like a children's song. Like if the Wiggles sang Solar System, I'm here for it. But exactly. I'm like, what are we doing with this?
Well, there's that, and it also has because some of my friends that actually do have a Beach Boys podcast, you should check them out. Two Next Podcast, they did an episode where they they basically did this sort of fantasy scenario with another friend of theirs to be like, what if the Muppets sang "The Beach Boys Love You"? Which
that
Muppet?
tracks.
Mitch,
I would accept that more.
Yeah, which Muppet would sing which song, and what would the setting be? And like Solar System is probably the most Muppety song.
Yes, like it doesn't seem real.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
it doesn't seem like you couldn't sing it straight outside of the context of like
there is an element to records where you do, and I think this goes back to the conversation we were having about the roller skating song. Like you're like, well, people didn't really get it because like the narrator was like a full grown man singing about a very nostalgic time, and that didn't quite like track with people. And in my head, I wasn't even thinking about the fact that the Beach Boys were singing it. I was just like, oh, Brian Wilson to me is a very like naive character, and I was just like, oh, he's just talking about when he was like 12. Like, so for me, you do have to remember that when people listen to a record, they are listening to it in whatever character they think the artist is. And people, this is a very like inside baseball thing, because a lot of like people, they don't think of artists as characters, but they are. Like, and those narratives and those like ways that artists are presented to the world is very, very crafted by their teams. It's something that I've had to think about as an artist. It's something you think about as an artist. Like, what kind of person and persona are you presenting to the world? And Brian has a very specific persona.
But this was like him at his most unfiltered.
Right. And I think... So the Solar System song to me, it's like I can track with the kind of like when I think about who Brian is and I think about who the Beach Boys are, like I'm tracking all the way until I get to Ding Dang and Solar System. I'm like, all right, we've gone a little too far. I can't picture why you are singing this.
Well, again, Ding Dang, it kind of demonstrates Brian's kind of, how I should say, duality between like creative person, but also, his somewhat, at least at that time, somewhat obsessive or compulsive behavior that was brought on by mental health issues.
Right.
So again, he had retreated, but plenty of rock stars, you hear stories about them going to visit Brian's house or visiting Brian, and Brian would always be very aloof, or he would be very like, hi, and then just kind of go into another room or do something else. He was somewhat not isolated, but would be closed off. So, and then when you would get something out of him, if you were lucky in those days, like Roger Burgund was, it was like, okay, he's playing Shortening Bread or whatever, he's playing that tune, And again, Shortening Bread is a song that he would revisit to incorporate in other songs over and over and over and over again until pretty much up until today, if you will. So if you understand sort of what Brian, I think, was kind of going through psychologically, it makes sense. And at the same time, it's like you could look at it as sort of a little silly reprieve from everything else that's happening too, which just says a lot because there's a lot of silly things happening.
He's the silliest.
Yeah.
He's just like a silly mad scientist, genius, musician man.
Yeah.
That's who Brian Wilson is.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because for the production of this record, he's using synthesizers that he never used before. So he's just kind of seeing how everything works and just kind of using the sounds that are available to him that he's able to get, that's I think where sort of the punk influence kind of comes from in that sense, because it's a very, like I said, it's very unfiltered. It's very, kind of straight ahead. You just play what you got, and there's not a lot of mixing involved in the record in and of itself. All the synthesizers are layered pretty naturally, and the Beach Boys sing, and their harmonies are very natural. There's not like really any effects or anything like that going on. And real quick, I'll just briefly highlight the other two songs, Mona and Love Is a Woman, which both have probably the most polarizing lead vocals out of all the album. But again, I am definitely a fan of Dennis Wilson, lead singing anything and everything, even when he was like, because right after this record, he went on to work on his seminal solo debut album, Pacific Ocean Blue, And that album, which would also be a good one to talk about on a future episode, is that he still retains a very soulful vocal. You know, it's not as like pretty, but it's still got a lot of heart to it. It's still got a lot of emotion in it. And it's funny for him to sing a song like Mona, which again was written by Brian. Funnily enough, I Want to Pick You Up, which was also written by Brian. They're all written by Brian. Dennis sang lead on that one too. So it just kind of, at least Mona to me is also just kind of a fun song. Love Is a Woman is definitely Brian singing lead at his most I don't give a ask me no questions lead vocal. He's just gonna sing it and doesn't care if it's in tune or not in tune.
And at times it was not.
A lot of times it was not. Well, I mean, it was, but it wasn't like
it wasn't pristine.
It wasn't it wasn't a pretty vocal, you know. And so you know, when Brian passed away, that hit a lot of us hard. It definitely hit me hard.
I know. I was gonna ask, how are you doing?
I'm okay.
Are you sure?
I don't know. I think I'm okay.
All right.
I'm okay for the moment.
It was a world-stopping thing when Brian passed, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a bad day.
Yeah.
Can I share a funny story from that day?
What about?
Okay, so we're not dramatic at all.
I'm dramatic.
I know, that's sarcasm, babe.
Oh. Sorry.
And so Brian Wilson passed.
Mm-hmm.
I get a call from Luis. He tells me, I get a call from Slice. He tells me Brian Wilson has passed. And I'm like, how you doing? And he was kind of sad. And then he put something on his Instagram story that just says, I can't say more, but the world has stopped, or something. It was the most dramatic post ever. I didn't really think about it because I knew how much Brian meant to you. And I was like, okay, yeah, okay. But then I start getting texts from all of our friends throughout the day being like, are you guys okay? Have you been in a car accident? Like, is someone dying? And I was like, what is going on? And then I realized it was because of that post. People did not understand that. I
mean, some people did.
Some people understood.
My people did. Yours did not.
My people were very concerned, which was very, very sweet.
I mean, yes, they should.
But
I mean, they were warranted to, but they didn't understand the reason.
They don't understand your melodramatic
sense of humor.
Instagram post.
Sense of humor.
It was quite funny at the time. I was like, no, we're all fine. Everybody's fine. Brian Wilson has passed away.
Yeah.
Please send your flowers to Luis.
Yeah.
Please send flowers to Slice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, no, it was very hard that day. It was very hard for a couple of days. You know, and I think I found out, and I think I messaged one of my friends, Sean, who him and his wife Lisa have the Two Next podcast, and you know, we were both in the Beach Boys ensemble at the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago. So a lot of times I'll ask him about, you know, random things about the Beach Boys or Brian that I get curious about, or I wouldn't know because he would definitely know, or he would definitely know the source of it. So I think I messaged him before he even saw it, or like as he saw, you know. So we were, us and plenty of other Brianistas from the Old Town class, you know, we all kind of, you know, sort of paid attention and said a lot of different things about it, you know.
You know, the most beautiful thing though, and this is a testament to the Beach Boys and their legacy, is just how deeply that impacted you.
Well, they deeply impacted me, but they also, like, there's a distinction, I will say, between how the Beach Boys impacted people and how Brian impacted people.
Yeah, definitely.
And I fall a little bit more into the latter category, which gets very much deeper, because it's not just the music, it's also Brian's story. It's also, you know, Brian's abilities as a creative person. It's his, you know, all the things that he had gone through and all of the great music that came out partly out of that struggle. It's like the difference of when you go see Mike Love's Beach Boys versus Brian. It's like, when you're going to see Mike Love's Beach Boys, you're getting a show. When you're going to see Brian, you're going to church, because he's, you're seeing
I love that.
It's like you're seeing Mozart, perform his greatest works. And so it hit a lot of us hard, because Brian Wilson's fans are a community. They are a community, much more tight-knit and much more into it than like your sort of typical kind of run-of-the-mill Beach Boys fan community, And we acknowledge the contributions and the importance of other Beach Boys, don't get me wrong, and I will always be someone that highlights that whenever talking about him, especially because they don't get talked about enough, I think, compared to what Brian has done for sure. But for us, it was music that brought us together. It was music that brought all of us together, that we all bonded over, that we, made fun of things together. I mean, Sean and Lisa met because they started chatting on a Beach Boys forum.
Right.
Yeah. That, and
that led to get them getting married.
Yeah,
which is a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, and Pet Sounds was the album that pretty much got me through high school.
Yeah.
So personally, that's what the music means to me, and a lot of their other records have also meant that to me in the same way and in other ways as well. So with Love You, I felt, because we'll talk about Pet Sounds, and I do have a lot to say about Pet Sounds for sure. But I figured everyone does talk about Pet Sounds already. Everyone knows about Pet Sounds for the most part. And I figure if we're talking about something that is maybe in tribute to Brian, the Beach Boys' Love You is the album that I think is the most representative of who Brian is and was, and the impact he has had. Even in the face of, the adversity he was dealing with at the time, because it was shortly after this record kind of got done, is that he started getting psychiatric care, and then the first stint with Landy went well, and then they didn't want to pay him more, so Landy left, and he started to spiral again in the mid to late 80s, and then he got psychiatric care again, and that's when Landy was abusing him and over-medicating him and taking control of his financial assets. And then he luckily got out of that by the early 90s, and did some things with the Beach Boys, and then eventually became a solo artist in 1999, something that nobody on the planet thought would ever happen at all. And he did it, and then he finished Smile. No one ever thought that would happen either. And then he continued to make more solo music. He continued touring. People went to see him live, and he got to share that music with new audiences, new generations of audiences. I saw Brian 10 times live, solo. I saw him with the Beach Boys during their reunion show. I've met Brian twice, and I have a couple things signed by Brian. I even entered a holiday contest to do something creative on and posted on social media. I did a cover of Little Saint Nick, and I ended up winning a replica of the original Beach Boys business card from back in 1962, and Brian signed it on the back.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so that was yes.
And when I think what's so fun is you're a true fan of Brian and the Beach Boys, but you're also part of the lineage of the Beach Boys. That's something that I talk about a lot for artists, is there is a clear lineage for the art that they make now, and who influenced them, and where they come from. And Brian is definitely part of your lineage for sure.
Well, part of that is for, there's musical reasons for that for sure. I'm very much influenced by the Beach Boys harmonies and compositionally what Brian does, but it's also because I was born in California, and the Beach Boys are a California band, and that part is really almost more incidental than anything. There's excuse me, there's there's a certain vibe, I think, for artists from California that's kind of hard to learn or hard to kind of capture. There's very few artists that I think can capture that are not from California, or at least be influenced by that. It's really, I mean, you could definitely point to things that the Beach Boys have influenced outside of California, but you can also tell like that there's certain California artists that just have had the vibe that they had.
Well, I didn't understand the music until we were driving Highway 1 and you were playing a Beach Boys record, and like surrounded by the ocean and just the beauty and the certain landscape that was on that road. You get it. You get it for the first time. And as somebody who grew up very, very far away from California and I away from surf culture, and just the ocean in general, I don't think I fully got it.
Well, the funny thing, here's the funny thing about that is that there's a book that came out originally in the late 70s, and then it's been republished. It was republished a few years ago, called God Only Knows, Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, and the California Myth. And basically the thesis statement of the book, I'm still reading it, is that what really Brian and the Beach Boys created was sort of this fantasy that made California be perceived as this sort of oasis to the rest of the world, and not just the rest of America, the rest of the world. They created this world, like we were kind of saying at the beginning. You know,
I don't think you could make that kind of music if you hadn't grown up there. I just don't think it's possible.
Well, especially because they grew up when it was a very, the LA they grew up in was not like it was. I mean, they grew up in Hawthorne, California. I mean, nowadays Hawthorne is kind of is a pretty rough place. You know, it's if you ask anybody that lives there now, and I knew someone that did live there, grew up there, of my generation that's close to my age, and yeah, it's pretty rough. It's not always the safest neighborhood. I guess that was kind of how they described it, but they lived in where they came from was this point of optimism. There was, optimism. It was post World War II, so there's this optimism about, where America was growing, how its economy, the housing market was booming. Everyone had nice suburban homes, and, they lived only like 20, 30 minutes from the beach, and Dennis was the only surfer of the band, no one else surfed, but that's what I'm saying is like Brian didn't always write his own lyrics. They were written often by Mike Love and Roger Christian in the early years, and that's where you kind of get the sense of optimism and positivity, where Brian is very melancholy, and so that's what kind of gave their music depth, as not just, all fun in the sunshine, but rather, this sort of, just kind of feeling of darkness and hope, darkness turning into hope. I remember there's a lyric from the last Beach Boys album, and there's actually several lyrics that kind of describe this. It's the final suite from That's Why God Raided the Radio, where the second to last on Pacific Coast Highway, where the lyric Brian writes, "The sunlight's fading and there's nothing left to say. My life, I'm better off alone. My life, I'm better on my own." And then the last song, which is Summer's Gone, which was originally supposed to be the title of their last album, but I figured that wouldn't have been the most inviting title. But yeah, and then, that the whole sort of idea is that, summer ends, things end, but there's always next year. And that's where the sort of silver lining, appears in those kinds of songs, in their music. There's always some sort of silver lining in the face of like loneliness or darkness or uncertainty, which Brian knew a lot about growing up, even though, he was a fairly popular and well-adjusted kid, didn't grow up with the best father, security wise or emotionally, he very much beat his kids, so he faced a lot, and he had dealt with a lot internally, and music was for him a way to either escape or to get all that out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, what has made people really, really gravitate to their music, what made them such fans and such diehards, because that's how they connected with it.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up this album, and we do that with the same question every time,
Mm-hmm.
which is, why does this album matter to the culture, and why should somebody specifically listen to it? What would they get out of it specifically?
So I think in terms of the culture, I mean, it's like I said, it's very much creatively one of the best records the Beach Boys had ever made within their canon, so it's definitely important in that ways, but it's also definitely important in the ways that it did influence, lo-fi and punk, and to a certain extent synth pop as well, because and it was 76, synth pop didn't exist yet, as a genre or an art form. You had some doing proto stuff and incorporating synthesizers like in prog rock and things like that, but synth pop was not an established genre or market of music yet. And it wouldn't be until like the next year or the year afterwards where it would start to kind of infiltrate the charts or infiltrate popular music tenfold. Well, tenfold was really in the 80s with new wave, but you didn't have like the sort of proto-punk until a little bit later. So for those reasons, it's very important.
It kind of speaks to like there really is a world before the Beach Boys, and then there's a different world after them.
And I think about that quite often. I think about that with a few bands. I think about that with the Beatles too. Which,
it's a short list that you can say that about. Really.
Well, it's like, I say that, but then it's like, I think a while back I thought about like, could you imagine what the world was like before the Macarena existed? Like that's what I'm saying. There's those like sort of cultural touchstones, and this really applies to all the Beach Boys music. Is if you really want to know who Brian was, listen to the music, because that will tell you. Brian, he hated being interviewed. He really didn't like talking about himself because a lot of times he would be asked the same questions, had to give the same answers, was very, short and brief in his answers. But, his music is much more revealing about himself, and it reveals much more about himself than he probably could ever articulate through mere words. And, again, my personal connection is the Beach Boys themselves, and this record is part of that, as part of that journey. I came into this record when I was exploring the Beach Boys catalog, and I had bought the Beach Boys 2 for a CD of 15 Big Ones and Love You. So slowly I started to go through the discography, and I saw that this one was the one that stuck out the most to fans, and it is one of my favorites. I'll tell you one thing too. It's definitely, I really recently listened to it on vinyl again for the first time in a while. It holds up on vinyl, especially if you have a vinyl stereo system, definitely get this record on vinyl. There's kind of a special vibe when you listen to it on there versus, listening to it on CD or or through headphones on streaming. So definitely check this record out if you're not aware of it. It'll definitely, I think, especially if you're into that kind of sound, into that sort of like kind of weird, janky, synthy, innocent sounding kind of music. But it's also just one of those great musical curiosities, I think, that still holds up.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning into another episode of The Home Records. If you like what you've been hearing, you can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else that you get your podcasts.
And if you'd like to show your support, please give us a 5-star review, and be sure to spread the word to all your friends, family,
and enemies.
And thanks once again. We will see you for the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.